Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. News just broke that Henry Cavill is working with Marvel to return as a totally new character after his Deadpool and Wolverine cameo scene as the Cavalrine. And this new character would be a more permanent Marvel character, not just a one-off funny cameo scene. Ryan Reynolds also talked about working with Henry Cavill on set during the Deadpool commentary, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. Henry Cavill also just announced that he was doing that new live-action Voltron movie. He's also doing the Warhammer series, the Warhammer movies, so it sounds like we're getting way more Henry Cavill in the next several years. People have been fan-casting him as different Marvel characters for years, so it's almost like Marvel is starting to listen to the fans more. And based on what they've said, Marvel really is treating him way better than DC has recently, so that joke during Deadpool was actually meant to be more foreshadowing for the future, on top of them just clowning on DC.
On behalf of all humanity, this just feels right. We will treat you so much better than those down the street.
You were just leaving.
DC's loss is Marvel's gain. But Henry Cavill is not coming back as the Cavalrine. That was just meant to be a one-off cameo scene. The character he's talking about doing at Marvel will be totally different. He was great as the Cavalrine. That was why Deadpool had all those specific jokes about this just feeling right. But after the success of Deadpool and Wolverine, now the 7th highest earning comic book movie of all time from any studio of all time, Ryan Reynolds just posted something to his social media saying that they would be doing this until they're 90, like all the jokes said in the movie. So until the end of time, Hugh Jackman probably going to be one of the main versions of Wolverine till they recast someone in several years. Then there'll just be 2 versions of Wolverine because they'll keep bringing him back. Ryan Reynolds did say that the Henry Cavill Wolverine scene was the very first scene that they filmed for the movie. He was amazing on set, and even though Henry Cavill hates smoking in real life, made himself sick smoking a cigar all day during the takes they did to be more comic book accurate, showing what a champ he is. The Giga Chad Wolverine. The meta of his scene also just works so well, because not only has he been working with Marvel to play a permanent new Marvel character, Marvel will actually treat him way better than DC ever did. Literally all they have to do to keep him happy is just not do what DC did. But both of them have been huge parts of the DC universe at different parts in their careers and then summarily got kicked out. It's what brought the two of them together and one of the reasons why Henry Cavill was so quick to sign on to the Deadpool movie. As for the new character he'll be returning as on a permanent basis, there have been a billion fan casts of him as Captain Britain, Hyperion, Mr. Sinister, the Beyonder, even Cyclops in that new X-Men reboot movie that they're working on right now. He'd previously talked about doing Captain Britain in the MCU way back before he found out that he'd been recast as Superman in the DC movies. How ironic that he would then be offered and sign on to play a character. He said being Captain Britain would be loads of fun to do, cool modernized version of that, like the way they modernized Captain America, Steve Rogers' Captain America. There's something fun about that, and I do love being British. I think at the time he was doing his interview talking about Captain Britain, that he was just trying to say that he was open to anything in the Marvel Universe if he were available, but then cut to a couple years later, James Gunn gets hired by Warner Brothers to revive the DC Universe. He decides to completely reboot the main Justice League actors, including Superman. But what he's talking about is doing Captain Britain set in present day. Think like Henry Cavill in Man from U.N.C.L.E. or during the Mission Impossible movies, that sort of modern day type of hyperkinetic action, but with him running around swinging a sword. And most of you have been watching him as Geralt the Witcher on The Witcher Netflix, so everyone toss a coin to your Captain Britain. Also, what a coincidence that he's no longer playing Geralt heading forward with the Witcher universe. That was a huge bummer, but essentially he's trading the Witcher Netflix for his own Warhammer series and movies, which I would call an upgrade, so things are actually looking pretty good for him. And when he says modernize the Captain Britain character, the main version of Captain Britain, Brian Braddock, was created in the 1970s, so a lot of adventures that he had traded on major pop culture events of that era. That's also why they had that really cool Avengers Endgame Easter egg for Captain Britain during the time heist mission to the 1970s. He stumbles into an office only to see that it's Peggy Carter's S.H.I.E.L.D. office on the base, and they play for this really dramatic moment. He gets really sad thinking about how much he loves her. And as he watches her walk in from the other side of the glass, trying to stay hidden, she mentions Agent Braddock, and that's meant to be a reference for Brian Braddock, who became Captain Britain in the 1970s. But speaking of Peggy Carter, talking about that Avengers Endgame scene, during the What If episodes that I did videos for recently, we kind of got a multiverse version of Peggy Carter, Captain Britain with the costume. But the way they played the character, she was more like Captain America, just wearing a Captain Britain-looking costume, than being a straight-up Captain Britain, just because his backstory is so different from Captain America's backstory. In my opinion, it was a big missed opportunity for some cool Easter eggs. But big connection to the Eternals movie, so Captain Britain's backstory is a little bit like Dane Whitman's Black Knight backstory. It trades very heavily on the King Arthur mythology, British legends, magic, and characters like Merlin traveling through time and the multiverse. During the Eternals movie, when the Eternals go back to the Domo, their spaceship in present day, they find that Makkari has been living there for centuries while they've all been living apart, and over that time, she's collected, hint, stolen, many priceless artifacts from across history and all the adventures that they had when they were still together. While they're having fun picking through her piles of treasure, Thena picks up a sword, swinging it around, remembering the period of history where they all lived in Camelot together with King Arthur, Lancelot, Merlin, and the Knights of the Round Table, and Sprite asks her if the sword she's playing with is the Ebony Blade, which is a huge Black Knight Easter egg. Because the original Black Knight comes from Camelot and the Ebony Blade was forged by Merlin, but then Thena says no, it's Excalibur, like the legendary Excalibur given to Arthur by the Lady in the Lake, meaning that all those legends were real historical events in the MCU, like King Arthur was a real person. In Big Doctor Strange connection, Merlin was the Sorcerer Supreme of his era. But bringing it back around to all the magical swords, while the Black Knight wields the Ebony Blade, Captain Britain wields Excalibur for a brief period, and we just saw Excalibur in the Eternals movie, as well as the Ebony Blade in that post-credit scene. Most of the time, though, Captain Britain's main weapons are the Amulet of Right and the Sword of Might. Tying it back to Deadpool and Wolverine, if you watch the bonus features from the movie really carefully with the fine-tooth comb, you can actually spot in the background of the Resistance's base, you see the wall where Blade keeps all of his weapons. You notice he's got versions of both Excalibur from the Eternals movie and the Sword of Might, meaning that both of those have been pruned from somewhere in different universes to the void inside the MCU. Just like Kit Harington's Dane Whitman Black Knight, Brian Braddock's Captain Britain comes from a powerful British family that goes back to the Middle Ages. His father was the previous version of Captain Britain. And when a new Captain Britain is selected, Merlin and his daughter Roma come to the new candidate and offer them a choice between the amulet and the sword. It's sort of a test of character, like the Holy Grail test in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Choosing the amulet represents the path of reason, while the sword represents the path of violence. Generally, Merlin tends to favor the people who choose the amulet, like you have chosen wisely, but you can still choose the path of violence, like pick the sword and become the next Captain Britain. The amulet and the sword are super powerful, but unlike the Black Knight, he doesn't only get his powers from the blade or the amulet. Most of his abilities are powered by interdimensional energies which are concentrated around the British Isles and Otherworld. Otherworld is this pocket dimension next to Earth where Avalon exists from the King Arthur mythology. It's this realm of really powerful magic where Merlin lives when he's not running around the main Marvel universe. Captain Britain's costume also kind of serves as a tether to this magical field that he draws his energy from. But basically, his powers are similar to Captain America's powers in that he has enhanced strength, stamina, durability, speed, but the amulet he wears also gives him a limited ability to fly. At this point in Marvel Phase 5, Marvel Phase 6, we're still trading very heavily on multiverse tropes. We have Deadpool and Wolverine, which literally involves the TVA from Loki Season 2 in many different universes. The Captain Britain stories, especially the more recent ones, trade heavily on multiverse tropes. You may remember a couple years ago, after Avengers Endgame came out, there were a couple rumors that we would see a version of Captain Britain in the upcoming movies. I'm also really hoping for a Kit Harington Black Knight Disney Plus series, since they can use the extra episodes and room to just flesh out all that King Arthur mythology and backstory that they teased during the Eternals movie, and introduce the MCU Merlin and explain the history of the Ebony Blade and how the Eternals were connected to all that. The whole idea being that Merlin, being Sorcerer Supreme of his era, would be knowledgeable enough to understand that the Eternals were not human. So even if King Arthur didn't know what was going on with them, Merlin probably knew what was up with the Eternals. And it was just announced a little while ago that Marvel was using Kit Harington's Black Knight and Emilia Clarke's Gia from Secret Invasion to form a British Excalibur type of team, using them in the MCU, kind of like a British version of the Avengers, with Sonya Falsworth being kind of like a British Nick Fury. Hopefully that works out. That would be a pretty crazy Game of Thrones reunion for those two characters. Like, remember the last time we met, you actually killed me? They even had a big Game of Thrones reunion during the Eternals movie. They could also be bringing Henry Cavill in as a version of Captain Britain for this new Excalibur series to put him on this British version of the Avengers. And even though Hyperion would be super cool, I don't think Henry Cavill wants to be typecast as a Superman character, and Hyperion is basically like an evil version of Superman in the MCU. Because Homelander's already meant to be an evil parody of Superman, imagine if Homelander were actually an Eternal from another planet. That's basically Hyperion in the MCU. His backstory on the planet and the circumstances of how he came to Earth are meant to be a parody of Superman's backstory and what happened with Krypton in the DC universe. He basically shows up on Earth claiming that his home planet was destroyed when secretly he was an Eternal, and early theory, his original planet just had an emergence with a Celestial being born which destroyed the planet, and like the Eternal's regular mission, he just moved on to the next planet with a Celestial that needed to be born afterwards and shows up on Earth claiming that he's a powerful alien. Even though we have Tiamat inside the Indian Ocean, basically he could still show up on Earth claiming that he was from a destroyed planet, quote unquote, when really it was just an emergence. They've actually used his character a lot during the animated series. Marvel could always do a version of Squadron Supreme at some point, but again, like I said, I think it's more likely Henry Cavill would try to avoid playing another type of Superman character, so he's probably not going to be Hyperion. Let me know in the comments though, who do you think that he is playing? If we hear more about that Excalibur TV show too, I will do more videos about it. There's a bunch of big stuff coming up. Marvel also released Deadpool and Wolverine on home video. I've already done a much larger video about all the Easter eggs, deleted scenes, and bonus material on that, including Ryan Reynolds' commentary where he goes into a lot more deleted scenes and Easter eggs. So click here for that. There's a ton of stuff that they cut out of the movie. And click here for my Agatha All Along episode 6 video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.